Welcome back for another deep dive. This time, we are taking a journey into the incredible world of human memory and motivation.
That's right.
And to guide us on this adventure, we have excerpts from the audiobook of Psychology, Ninth Edition, by David G. Myers. I'm excited to unpack these concepts with you.
Me too. I think it's going to be a fascinating deep dive.
So let's start with memory. Now, we've all heard of the classic three-stage model, right? Sensory memory, short-term memory, and long-term memory. But guess what? There's been an update.
Yes. The old model, it's kind of like using a flip phone in the age of smartphones.
Right.
Researchers realized that short-term memory is much more dynamic than they initially thought. They renamed it working memory to really emphasize its active role in processing information.
Okay.
It's like the mental workspace where our brains are constantly juggling ideas, making connections, solving problems.
So it's not just about holding information briefly, it's about actually using it in real time.
Exactly. And that's why you might remember a phone number long enough to dial it, but then poof, it's gone 2 seconds later.
That happens to me all the time. So is that also why I sometimes lose my train of thought so easily?
Well, there's actually a link between working memory capacity and intelligence and focus.
Really?
Yeah, studies have shown that people with a larger working memory capacity, they tend to do better on intelligence tests and are better at staying on task.
So are you saying that people who can juggle more mental balls in the air are likely to be more intelligent?
There's definitely a correlation.
Okay, so maybe I shouldn't feel so bad about those mind-wandering moments then.
Exactly. It's all part of how our brains work.
Okay, so working memory got a fancy upgrade. But what about long-term memory? That's where all the, juicy stuff is stored. Childhood memories, embarrassing moments, random trivia.
Yeah, long-term memory. It's like a vast library. Like, imagine shelves that seem to extend infinitely. That's where our brain stores information for the long haul. And some memories, they take effort to get there, while others, they slip in through a back door without us even realizing it.
Interesting. So sneaky memories. Now, how do we make sure the important things get encoded into long-term memory? Like I'm thinking about all those times I crammed for exams and then poof, it's gone the next day.
The key is the level of processing. It's not enough to just passively read or hear information. You have to engage with it. Think about it.
Okay,
Connect it to what you already know.
got it.
Put it in your own words. It's like building a mental web of associations. The more connections you make, the stronger that memory becomes.
That explains why just reading my notes over and over doesn't work.
Right.
I need to actually think about the material.
Yes,
And
exactly.
make it meaningful to me.
Exactly. And this ties into something called the self-reference effect.
You okay?
We tend to remember things better when we relate them to ourselves, our experiences, our goals.
Like, for instance, if I'm trying to count the number of F's in a sentence,
Yes.
I'm much more likely to remember that if I'm actively engaging with the material, not just passively reading it.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
like you're adding a personal sticky note to that memory file.
Makes it easier to find later.
Exactly.
This is starting to make a lot of sense. Now, what about the actual physical structures in our brains that are involved in memory? Are different types of memories stored in different places?
Great question. The answer is yes.
Okay.
So the hippocampus, which is deep within our brains, acts as a temporary processing site for what we call explicit memories, things like facts and personal experiences. Think of it as like a busy librarian
Okay.
sorting and organizing all the incoming information before it gets filed away in the vast library of long-term memory.
Interesting. So what happens if the hippocampus gets damaged? Do those memories just vanish?
That's where it gets really interesting. There was a study, a fascinating case study of a patient who, even though he had severe amnesia and he couldn't form new explicit memories, he could still learn new skills and implicit memories.
Wait, so even with damage to the hippocampus, the brain can still learn in other ways?
It can adapt, yeah. These implicit memories, like riding a bike or playing an instrument, they are actually processed and stored in the cerebellum.
Oh, the cerebellum. Okay.
That's at the back of the brain. You can almost think of it as like the autopilot, allowing us to perform certain tasks without really consciously thinking about them.
So the hippocampus is for explicit memories, the cerebellum for implicit memories. Fascinating. But what about those really early childhood memories or lack thereof? Like I can't remember anything from when I was a baby. So that part of my life is just a blank slate.
Ah, yes, the infamous infantile amnesia.
Right.
It's very common.
Okay.
And it's likely due to a combination of factors. First, the hippocampus, as we discussed, it's one of the last brain structures to fully mature.
Oh, okay.
And second, babies They don't have the language skills to verbally label and categorize their experiences.
Right.
So it makes it really hard to retrieve those pre-verbal memories
Right.
later on.
Interesting. So it's like they're experiencing the world in a different language,
Exactly.
and their adult brains can't quite translate it.
Yeah, it's a fascinating phenomenon.
So our baby brains are busy forming all these implicit memories,
Yeah.
but then later, those early experiences are really hard to consciously access. Okay. Now, even when we have a fully developed hippocampus, we still forget things all the time. Why is that?
Retrieving memories isn't always a straightforward process. It's not like just pulling a specific file from a perfectly organized cabinet.
Right.
It's more like navigating a complex web of associations.
Hmm.
And the more retrieval cues you have, like sights, sounds, smells, emotions, associated with a particular memory,
Okay.
the easier it is to access it.
So that's why a familiar song, for instance, can suddenly transport me back to a specific time and place.
Yeah.
Or a certain scent can trigger a vivid memory.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Our senses are powerful retrieval cues. They help us reconnect with those stored experiences. But, and here's the thing, our memories aren't always perfect recordings of the past.
Oh, okay.
They can actually be influenced by misleading information. It's called the misinformation effect.
Is that like that study where people watched a video of a car crash?
Yes.
And then they were asked how fast the cars were going when they smashed into each other?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Those who heard the word smash, they were more likely to, overestimate the speed and even falsely remember seeing broken glass.
That is a little unsettling. So are you saying that we shouldn't trust our own memories?
It's not about distrusting them entirely, but it is a good reminder to be aware that they are malleable and they're not always perfectly accurate.
Okay, I'm going to need a minute to process that. Our memories, they are incredibly complex, and they can be influenced by our experiences, emotions, even the language we use. It's a lot to take in. But before my brain hits information overload, I think we need to switch gears and explore what fuels these memories, what makes us tick, motivation. But we will save that for part 2 of our deep dive.
Okay, so we've journeyed through this intricate world of memory, how our brains encode it, store it, and sometimes even misinterpret information. But now let's shift gears and delve into what fuels us, what motivates us to grab that extra slice of cake or, swipe right on a dating app or even just push ourselves to achieve those big goals.
Motivation, right? It's that engine that propels us forward. And psychologists have been fascinated by it, for centuries. Just like memory, there isn't one simple explanation for why we do the things we do.
So what are some of the key perspectives that psychologists use to understand this complex thing, motivation? Well, one early theory, it was called instinct theory, and it focused on those genetically predisposed behaviors. Think about like a baby bird, they instinctively open their mouths for food, or a salmon, swimming upstream to spawn. These are those innate patterns of behavior that contribute to our survival.
So it's almost like built-in programming. But humans are way more complex than a baby bird or a salmon.
Absolutely.
Right. We don't just act on instinct. There's so much more going on up there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where drive reduction theory comes in. It suggests that internal drives, things like hunger or thirst, they push us to reduce those needs, and maintain a stable internal state, what we call homeostasis.
Homeostasis.
Like a thermostat in your house, right? It kicks in when the temperature is too high or too low to bring it back to that equilibrium, that comfortable state.
Okay, I get it. So like when our stomach is growling, we eat to reduce that hunger and go back to that balanced state.
Exactly. It's maintaining that internal harmony. But there's more to motivation than just satisfying those basic needs. Arousal theory suggests that we're also driven to find an optimal level of stimulation. This helps explain things like curiosity or desire for new experiences, or even why some people enjoy, like, skydiving, while others prefer a quiet evening at home.
Oh, okay. So it's not just about reducing those needs. It's also about finding that sweet spot of excitement and engagement. That explains why I get restless when I'm bored and crave like a good puzzle or a thought-provoking book.
Okay. We're all wired a bit differently when it comes to our optimal arousal levels.
Right.
And then we have, of course, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This is a framework to understand how our different needs are prioritized.
Oh, yeah. Maslow's pyramid.
Yes.
I remember that from psychology class.
Right. It starts with those fundamental needs at the bottom, like food, water, shelter.
Right.
And then moves up to things like safety, belonging, esteem, and eventually self-actualization, like building a solid foundation.
Right.
Before you reach those higher aspirations.
You can't exactly create a masterpiece on an empty stomach, right?
Exactly.
Mm.
And Maslow argued that The needs that aren't met at those lower levels, they tend to really dominate our attention and our motivation.
Makes sense. Okay, so basic needs first, then we can climb that pyramid. But let's go back to those physiological needs for a minute. What about hunger? What's actually happening in our brains and bodies when we get those cravings? Is it really just our stomachs rumbling, or is there more to it?
Well, your stomach definitely plays a role,
Okay.
but the control center for hunger, it lies in a tiny but mighty structure
Hmm.
in the brain called the hypothalamus.
Okay.
And it's constantly monitoring your energy levels, receiving signals from your digestive system.
So the hypothalamus is like the conductor of the hunger orchestra.
Exactly. Coordinating all those different signals from the body.
So what are those signals exactly?
Well, we have a whole cast of hormones involved. Think of ghrelin as your stomach's alarm bell, basically shouting to the brain, hey, I'm empty down here. Time to eat.
I know that feeling. But if ghrelin is telling us to eat, what tells us to stop?
Well, once you start eating, your body, it releases other hormones like leptin, which signals that feeling of fullness.
Hmm.
Tells your brain, okay, we're good here. Time to put down the fork. It's like a hormonal balancing act.
So it's this constant back and forth between those hunger signals and those fullness signals. But it can't just be about hormones, right? I mean, I've definitely eaten when I wasn't physically hungry, maybe out of boredom or just because something looked delicious.
Absolutely. Our psychology, our culture, they play a huge role in our eating habits. Memories of our last meal, the anticipation of a yummy treat, social cues, cultural preferences, they all influence what, when, and how much we eat.
That's so true. I mean, I've definitely been swayed by like my social circles, eating habits, or, just cultural norms around food. But speaking of those cultural influences, there's a big difference between enjoying a good meal and struggling with obesity, right?
It's a critical distinction. And while our bodies are designed to kind of regulate our weight and maintain that healthy balance, there are a number of factors that can contribute to obesity, making it a really complex issue.
So it's not just about willpower or making better choices. There's more to it.
Much more. You see, our bodies, they actually have a set point, a weight range they try to defend. And when we lose weight, our metabolism slows down, our hunger increases, you know, it becomes an uphill battle to stay below that set point.
So even if you're trying really hard, your body might be working against you. That sounds discouraging.
Well, it's not about discouragement. It's about understanding the science. Weight management is this complex interplay of factors. We have to consider the role of fat cells. They increase in number and size when we gain weight, and even when we lose weight, they shrink, but they don't disappear, making it easier to regain that weight later on.
Oh, wow. That is a little bit of a bummer. But how do we use that information in a more empowering way?
Well, by understanding our body's natural tendencies, we can develop more realistic strategies for weight management. It's about working with our bodies, not against them.
Working smarter, not harder. I like it. Okay, but what about those genetic factors? Are some people just predisposed to gain weight more easily?
There's definitely a genetic component to weight regulation. Studies of identical twins raised apart have really shown that genes play a significant role in body weight. And scientists have even discovered specific genes, like the FTO gene, that are linked to obesity.
So some people might have a bit of a genetic disadvantage, but what about the environment, our lifestyle? I mean, we hear all the time how our modern lifestyle is making us fatter.
Right, and there's no denying that our environment plays a huge role. Our increasingly sedentary lifestyles, coupled with easy access to those calorie-rich processed foods, have created this perfect storm for weight gain.
Yeah.
We're constantly bombarded with ads for unhealthy choices, and portion sizes have become, well, supersized.
Right, so it's not just our genes, it's the world around us.
Yes.
We're constantly being tempted. But what about those late night cravings? I swear my willpower just vanishes after like 8 p.m.
Ah, yeah, the late night snacking. Well, sleep deprivation actually disrupts our hormone balance, making us more vulnerable to those cravings and those impulsive food choices.
So my sleep habits could be impacting my eating habits.
It all ties together.
Wow. Okay, I had no idea. But I've also heard that our social circles can affect our weight. Is there any truth to that?
It's fascinating, right? Studies have shown that people are more likely to become obese if their friends become obese. It's like our social networks can have this ripple effect on our health behaviors.
It's a social contagion almost. Okay, we got to talk about eating disorders too, though. It's not just about weight or food. It's a complex mental health condition.
Absolutely. Conditions like anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, binge eating disorder, these are serious mental health conditions that involve distorted body image, intense fear of weight gain, a preoccupation with food and control. They often stem from a complex interplay of biological, psychological, and social and cultural factors.
It's heartbreaking to see how much pressure, especially young women, face to conform to these unrealistic beauty standards.
It truly is. Early intervention and addressing those underlying psychological and social influences are so crucial for treating these disorders effectively.
Okay, so we've covered hunger, we've covered eating disorders, two powerful drives that can sometimes feel at odds with each other. Now let's talk about another primal urge, sexual motivation. Is it just about hormones raging through our bodies, or is there something more to it?
Hormones definitely play a role, but just like everything else we've talked about today, it's much more nuanced than that. Masters and Johnson, back in the 1960s, their research, identified 4 stages of the human sexual response cycle:
Okay.
excitement, plateau, orgasm, and resolution.
Oh, yeah, I remember learning about those stages. It's amazing how our bodies respond during sexual arousal, but what's actually driving those responses? Is it purely biological, or do our thoughts and emotions play a role too?
While hormones, like testosterone, they are essential for sexual development and drive, psychological factors play a much more significant role in uh, human sexual motivation. Our thoughts, feelings, past experiences, cultural norms, personal preferences, it all influences our desires and behaviors.
So it's not just about biology, it's about our minds, our experiences, the social context we live in.
Precisely. External stimuli, like erotic images or videos, they can trigger arousal, although studies show that men and women tend to respond differently.
Okay.
And then there's the power of imagined stimuli or sexual fantasies.
Right.
These play a huge role in arousal for both men and women.
It's like our brains can create their own internal erotic worlds. But this kind of brings us to a topic that's often, well, surrounded by misinformation and controversy. Adolescent sexuality. What's the science behind those teenage hormones, that often complicated world of teenage love and relationships?
Puberty, it marks a huge shift in hormonal activity,
Right.
and it leads to an increased interest in sex and romantic relationships. But social and cultural factors, they play a huge role in shaping teenagers' behaviors and choices. Family values, peer influences, access to education and contraception, all of it comes into play.
It's a time of exploration
It is.
and figuring things out.
Yeah.
But it can also be a time of increased risk. What are some of the factors that contribute to teen pregnancy rates? And what can we do to support young people in making those informed decisions about their sexual health?
Teen pregnancy rates, they're influenced by this complex web of factors, including cultural norms, socioeconomic factors, access to healthcare and accurate information, even media portrayals of sex and relationships. Open communication between parents and teenagers, comprehensive sex education programs, and access to affordable contraception, those can all play a significant role in reducing teen pregnancy rates.
This conversation has taken us into some sensitive territory,
Yeah.
but it's so important to talk about these things
Totally.
openly and honestly,
Absolutely.
based on scientific understanding, not societal assumptions.
Right.
And speaking of topics that often generate really strong opinions, let's dive into this complex world of sexual orientation.
Okay, so we've covered hunger, we've explored that sex drive, but now I want to talk about a different kind of motivation, one that's all about connection, this need to belong. I mean, we as humans, we have this deep-seated need to form those bonds with others. Why is that? Well, you're tapping into something so fundamental about human nature.
Right.
From the evolutionary perspective, social connections were really essential for survival.
Right.
I mean, think about it. Children needed caregivers. Adults needed to cooperate for, hunting and gathering protection.
Right.
Those who forged strong social bonds, they were more likely to survive and pass on their genes.
So you're saying it's literally woven into our DNA.
It's a powerful force.
That's incredible.
And research actually shows that, feeling connected to others, it brings all sorts of benefits. Increased happiness and well-being, improved physical health, even a longer lifespan.
Hold on. So having those strong social connections can actually help us live longer. I knew friendships were good for the soul, but I had no idea they were good for the body too.
They are. But on the flip side, social isolation and loneliness,
Yeah.
they can have some pretty detrimental effects on both our mental and physical health.
Yeah, I've definitely felt that sting of rejection before, and it's not a good feeling at all. It's just like this deep ache that just lingers.
And it's more than just unpleasant. Research actually suggests that the same areas of the brain that light up when we feel physical pain also become activated when we experience that social rejection.
Wait, so you're saying that social pain is actual physical pain?
It's processed very similarly in the brain.
That explains why, like, heartbreak can feel so physically debilitating.
Mhm.
Wow. It's like our brains are literally wired to experience rejection as this, like, threat to our well-being.
Exactly. And this, what we call this social pain response, it highlights how deeply ingrained this need to belong really is. It's not just a fluffy concept, it's essential for our survival. And this need to belong, it drives so much of our social behavior, like why we conform to group norms or, why we strive to make those good impressions, why we crave acceptance.
It's like this invisible force shaping our interactions, influencing our decisions.
What powerful.
We're all just trying to navigate this complex social world and find our place. It's amazing how much psychology is at play.
It really is. And, psychology is all around us. It's in our personal relationships and even in our professional lives.
Mhm.
Speaking of work, did you know that there's actually a whole field of psychology dedicated to understanding these principles, memory, motivation, belonging, in the workplace?
Really?
It's called industrial organizational psychology,
Okay.
or IO psychology for short.
Okay.
And these IO psychologists, they apply psychological principles to the workplace to help organizations optimize everything. Hiring practices, employee engagement, even overall productivity.
So they're like, oh, workplace whisperers, helping companies understand their employees better and create a more, I don't know, harmonious work environment.
Yeah.
But what are some specific things these IO psychologists actually do?
Well, one area is called personnel psychology,
Hmm.
and they focus on things like employee recruitment, selection, training, performance appraisal. They use these tools and assessments to help companies identify the right people for the right jobs.
So it's not just about looking at a resume and checking boxes. They're trying to really get to know the candidate, their personality, their skills, their motivations.
It's about finding the right fit.
Okay.
It benefits the employee and the employer. But IO psychology goes beyond just hiring. Another important area is organizational psychology, which focuses on the bigger picture. The work environments, the management styles, organizational structures, how they can impact worker satisfaction, productivity, and overall well-being.
So it's about creating a company culture that fosters engagement, motivation, a sense of belonging.
Exactly. One concept that organizational psychologists often talk about is flow. It's a state of, complete absorption in your work. You lose track of time. You feel that sense of mastery, like you're really in the zone.
Oh, I've definitely experienced that. When I'm working on a project that I'm really passionate about, I mean, hours can fly by without me even noticing.
That's flow. And research actually shows that employees who regularly experience this flow state at work, they tend to be more productive. They're more creative. They're more satisfied with their jobs.
Mhm.
And they're less likely to, experience burnout. So creating those work environments that facilitate flow
Mhm.
is a win for everyone involved.
It sounds like there's a lot of psychology involved in being a good manager.
There is.
It's not just about giving orders and expecting those results.
Right.
It's about understanding your employees' motivations,
Yes.
creating that positive work environment,
Exactly.
fostering a sense of belonging
Absolutely.
within a team. Wow, we've covered so much ground today.
You have.
From those intricate inner workings of our memories to that complex tapestry of motivation and even the psychology of the workplace. It's been an incredible journey. What's one key takeaway that you hope our listeners will walk away with today?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that understanding the human mind, it's a powerful tool. By learning how our memories work, what drives us, how to harness that power of connection, we can really unlock our potential. Whether we're trying to improve our study habits or achieve those career goals or build stronger relationships or just navigate the ups and downs of daily life, this knowledge can empower us.
It's like we've been given this behind-the-scenes look, this peek behind the curtain at our own minds, and now we can use that knowledge to make more informed choices, to live richer lives. To our listeners, I encourage you to reflect on your own experiences with memory, motivation, belonging. Keep asking those questions, keep exploring, and never stop learning about the amazing power of this thing we call the human mind. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.